And should we have less people showing? We could reduce some of the videos so that there's more visibility. That's good. Sorry, I'm like making everybody do that, but
Okay. Do you want to take a minute to look at your minutes just to,
Bethany screen sharing them. Tim is saying, can you see me?
yes.
So Tim's saying, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused where we said we didn't have enough members to make a quorum because the committee wouldn't have voting power. So we don't need a quorum. We just need to discuss items, collect information and report that back to the full commission. The commission would vote. So we don't, the minutes shouldn't state anything about a quorum.
That was Ernest who brought that up. If nobody has any objection, we could certainly remove that.
I think it's important to list who's there, but we don't need the statement.
Okay,
I mean, if there were only one person, we wouldn't have a meeting, obviously, but we don't need to have a quorum.
Bethany, may I ask that later you remove that statement that says at the start of the meeting, there were not enough committee members present to have a quorum?
Yes, I will.
All right, nobody has any issues with that? Thank you, Tim. As you recall, we had a speaker, and so the remainder of the minutes really talks about some of the information that our guest speaker presented to us about the OSIL program. Guest speakers, there were two.
Shall I close the shared screen?
No objections? I guess yes. Thank you. I just want to make sure that we have, that there are no questions about the minutes. All right, I see no questions, so we will consider the minutes to be accepted. And
Tim just said thumbs up.
all right, thank you. Now let's look and make sure that there's no member of the public who wishes to address us. I don't see anyone here who's not a committee member.
Do we need to, for purposes of the meeting, show the agenda?
You certainly could, yes. Thank you, Bethany. If you look under the first section, all the three items, the bullets are all running into one sentence. But we've accepted the minutes. There is no one here from the public, so we will move on to a current update from our executive director. Ernest, would you like to update us in general about what's going on with the commission?
Yes. So am I spotlit or pinned? Bethany, are you going to spotlight me? Ernest is saying, okay, I think I'm all set.
We are spotlighted now.
There you are.
Okay, great. So first, I wanted to thank Nancy for inviting me to go to the graduation of the Rhode Island School for the Deaf in June. I think it was the 16th,
Mhm.
wasn't it? Wow, what an experience. It was great. It was really wonderful to, talk a little about advice I had for people and to create a support system for students who are graduating and talk about next steps, how the system can support them and the students that, that we are here, that RICDHH, if they have a need or they have something that they want to know about, any access or anything, we can give them resources, we can refer them to things. And, to ask the students to contact us. And also we had graduation bag gifts, which was so nice. We gave all the students that, and I think they were thrilled with it. So I wanted to thank the warm welcome that I received. Nancy spoke to the graduating group, and thank you for inviting me to speak to them as the graduation speaker. And I've been in touch with a lot of different guest speakers all over the US that would be interested in coming to talk about, a community center in their states. A lot of people have responded and have shown interest. They would like to speak to us. And so I'm going to send that on to Nancy so that she can schedule in some of these people, maybe contact them. I know there's somebody from California, there's somebody from Ohio, and there's somebody else, not Boston, Mass, I think. All of them are interested in, sharing information with us, explaining what's happening with a community center in their areas and why it's so valuable to have that in their state. So that would be excellent. It'd be great. And also I have tried to contact the Spelman Center, the person who's responsible for those funds, and I have not been able to get an answer. I keep on hearing that they can't make it. And I was hoping that they could come here to our meeting, but at this point, I'm not going to bother them any longer. I feel like we need to move forward with our own goals. And also we still need a community center here in Rhode Island. I can see that it's more essential than ever because so much has been happening now with COVID, with the vaccinations, with people, with the pandemic. And we don't have a lot of hard evidence, but I would say that 50% or more of deaf and hard of hearing people are unvaccinated because of the lack of information. That's my guess, at least. And I feel like they're not clear about what we're trying to tell them. And we need to do so much more education. And it feels to me like deaf and hard of hearing people who have not had access to emails, to social media, they're not getting the information that's out there. And if we had a deaf center, community center, I'm hoping that possibly deaf people would go there, they would learn more about COVID, about vaccinations, about how to protect themselves. And I think it would make a difference. Because at this point, I just feel like we're at a loss. And my vision, my goal would still be to set up something here in Rhode Island as a deaf community center, because I'm seeing the needs are out there. People need education, they need employment, they need so much. And we're still working on this, but I wanted to thank Nancy for the support. And I'm hoping that in the next meetings, we can invite guest speakers from different states to talk about how they established that in their own states and how it has helped their communities. And that way we'd get a broader vision of what would need to be entailed here. And it might be 5 or 10 years down the future, but I think it would be something that could really make a difference. That's my report. So thank you.
I was just curious if you could tell us what some of the other committees are doing. Is there anything that we would benefit from knowing
Okay, yes, hold on a second. I'm just waiting for the spotlight. Great. So Ernest is saying, great, yes. We actually just had the employment committee right before this. It was back to back with the ed committee. And the employment committee, they're doing some amazing work. They are bringing in people for training to talk about how to provide equal access for deaf and hard of hearing people for job fairs. And the how to bring interpreters for the different companies who go. Let's say a deaf person goes to a job fair and there's all these tables, but they don't know how to access the different tables. There's no interpreters. So the Department of Labor and Training, we're really trying to educate them so that they can provide interpreters the same, so that we would have access the same way that non-deaf people have. And that if they contact somebody for more information, that we would know that we can provide them with interpreters. And also, we were talking about the panel that we had on May 25th. We had an in-depth discussion about different people speaking about their own personal journeys in their own employment. And the panel identified, they were all deaf and hard of hearing members. And the issue came up in each of their stories about self-advocacy. And what I was thinking is, let's say I'm taking an interview for a new job. Do I request the interpreter, or do I go there and just write notes back and forth? There's this scarcity kind of mentality of how am I going to communicate? And people don't feel comfortable asking for an interpreter. They feel it would put them at a disadvantage to start the interview that way. And so after that panel, we realized that equal access has to be ensured for deaf and hard of hearing people, that hard of hearing people also suffer from the lack of communication. So that Employment Commission has really been working to build, to make sure that all companies, employers have the idea that they need to provide interpreters if anybody requests that, and to empower deaf and hard of hearing people that when they are going for an interview, they need to be able to ask for that and not be worried about what the consequences are. And so I think with the Department of Labor and Training, what we're talking about now is just brainstorming about some ideas. And the next meeting, we'll move forward on developing some trainings for different employers about the appropriate use of interpreters for job fairs and interviews. For the Healthcare Committee, we've been really focused on the Healthcare System Transformation Project, HSTP, and the new program that's being set up at the Rhode Island College. They're going great guns with the program for healthcare that's called Public Health Equity Interpreter Training Program. It just starts coming up in August, it'll be, and a lot of interpreters have already been applying. And the program is focused on public health and on the idea of equity. And it's free tuition for people to learn there. So we're trying to recruit as many people as we want, people who want to come in to the field to understand more about the vocabulary and the venues that would happen in public health, and also to talk about equity, how to ensure that social justice is occurring as an interpreter. And it's really an exciting project right now. We've already brought in 3 faculty who are going to be teaching in the program. Those 3 are well-known nationwide, and it's a thrill to be in the middle of that right now. The Healthcare Committee has been working, and the HSTP also has been working on the healthcare system. They did the surveys about the healthcare providers, doctors and nurses, how they understood about deaf people and about providing interpreters and deaf culture, cultural sensitivity. And they've been analyzing the results. What they find is that more than almost 40% do understand about deaf culture, do know about what's happening out in the deaf community. Another 60% do not understand what being deaf is and why people would need interpreters. So now that they're analyzing the results, that's going to lead to some more trainings within the healthcare provision field out in Rhode Island for people to understand why it's important to provide interpreters, what the Americans with Disabilities Act is. So that's been fascinating. The other, the tele-relay communications, we have not had a meeting yet, but we have the full committee finally. We just got the recruitment completed and we've got enough people. We have a meeting, I think, scheduled in September. That will be when we start with that. So we have not had anything to report about that. So that's a summary of the standing committees. And Tim is saying, I just wanted to say something too, if I could. I appreciate that report, Tim. We're going to switch interpreters.
Really enjoyed your report and the discussion about the panel and their experiences and asking interpreters about interviews. So when I was working in California, I was a case manager, and we had a program. I forgot how it got set up. In California, I think it was through the Department of Social Services, maybe. Anyway, they had money, and anytime a deaf person got a job interview, they could contact them and request, and they would send an interpreter to go with that person to show up to the interview. You didn't have to ask for an interpreter from the employer. You would go in together. And so everything was already prepared. There had already been the explanation, and we made sure they had the right interpreter for the right person. And it made sure that the person gave a good impression during the interview. And then when the interview was finished, if they decided to hire that deaf person, then they would explain the employer's responsibilities and the employee's rights, and make sure that they understood that fully. And then that responsibility would be transferred from the state to the employer. And so that's kind of interesting. It kind of reduces the work for the deaf person. And at the same time, it allows them to feel more confident with the interview, because they know that they're going to make a good impression on that person with the interview. And at the same time, it gives them the opportunity to for advocacy going forward and help with that. You know, just then starting out with advocacy, you know, because that doesn't always feel right. It doesn't always work out. Can you say more about that? Maybe it'd be better to contact NorCal Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Sacramento, California. Okay, Ernest says I'll do that. It's either VR or the Department of Social Services there. Rhode Island doesn't have Department of Social Services. I think it's maybe under DLT for them or Human Services. I'm not sure here, but it's almost, you know, similar to what we have here. Ernest says, that's great. Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ernest. I do think it's helpful to hear, for those of us who don't know many people on the other committees, it's helpful to know what is happening, what is the commission about, so that we're not at cross purposes. If there's anything that we can work alongside each other, that's the way to do it. Could you bring up the agenda again, Bethany?
Sure thing. Give me 1 second.
Thank you, dear. If you look under old business, you'll see that we already got a little bit of an update from Commissioner Covington about the Spellman funding. We still do not know the status of that because we're not getting a response from them. And so it's clear, I agree with Ernest, that if we're going to work on setting up a small agency as one of our goals, then we need to find our own funding, it seems. I would like to clarify though, Ernest, you used the term community center. And up until this point, we've been using the term educational agency or an agency. To me, a community center is very different than a Deaf Inc. So I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Does anybody have any feeling about that? We should be using the same language. Let me explain what I'm thinking. A community center, at least to the hearing, is a place where there's a lot of social activities. You can drop in. It's not a place of business per se. It's a place of more social activity. Up until this point, we have been talking about a small agency run by deaf individuals, similar to Deaf Inc., which is more of business is the wrong word, but more of a service agency to deaf people by deaf people. And so I want to make sure that we're all thinking about the same thing as we proceed with the next agenda items. Anybody disagree or have some thoughts about this? What are we looking at? Are we looking at a small agency or are we looking at a social service community center?
Tim says, often Deaf Inc., as an example, they do host social events. They allow other nonprofit organizations to have their business meetings or general meetings in their multi-purpose room. So we could envision setting up service agency, but that also had a strong, like participation in a place where people can come together socially or to host social events from outside businesses or agencies, like maybe a barbecue or a fundraiser, things like that. That's what I'm thinking. So that's more of a common mission of a servant agency, I think.
Thank you, Tim. My point for asking this is that if you're going to fundraise for an agency, it's very different than fundraising for a community center. So we want to be really clear what we're calling it so that we're looking at the right funding sources and the right streams of money. We know we can begin to listen to how other people set their agencies or community centers up, but we really can't proceed without some money. And to proceed without figuring out who might serve on a board. We can't do all the work ourselves. We really will need to designate a board of people who are interested. And we had talked a little bit about perhaps a survey to see if people would be interested in this kind of endeavor to set up a small agency. And I think it's great if it had a social component. But the issue is if you're hiring staff, you have to pay them to work. So how do you do that? So those are some of the concerns that I had, just that we standardize what we call it so that we can begin to look for some funding sources or some grants. But my concern is, what is our next step? I'm happy to invite groups that have community centers across the country. I'm happy to hear if they have some different ideas. But ultimately, we need to know if people in Rhode Island are interested in this, and if we're going to have a core group of people who will work with us on setting this up. It's not something I can do by myself. And so we really need to have a core group of people who have an excitement and a vision and a passion about this if we're going to proceed. That's what keeps me up at night, is how do we find this core group of people?
Saying, I think probably first we should start by having a community meeting invite stakeholders, invite different community people, and get them to come together and have an open dialogue about, we've already identified some needs in the state, and we're thinking about setting up an organization. And is that the best approach? Who in the community would be excited to be involved? And maybe start building that group of people, that basis. So we could start to develop, articles of incorporation, bylaws, vision, mission statements, that would all be part of an organization. And we could start there. That requires a few months, I think, like the IRS has to approve the 401s, the 501c.
503.
503, thank you.
5013C, I'm sorry.
So in that way, if we got that set up and we got the recognition from the IRS and we have the letter, then we could really start fundraising. People could make donations. We could start filling out applications for grants and money. I can already see that the healthcare HSTP group, they need people to go out and do training and presentations, about doctors and health professionals. And so they have already started and recognized that there's a big need. We also need services for deaf blind people. We have a lot of immigration community. So those different things, we don't have to wait to find the whole group or know exactly what we want to do clearly. I think we can go ahead and maybe find a small budget, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 in a grant possibly, and we could contract with some people, and then later it could be more of a full-time endeavor. So, but I think we just need to start by identifying those obvious needs and go ahead with some kind of meeting.
Okay, we have a suggestion on the floor from Tim that we hold a community meeting of some kind where we invite stakeholders to begin to build some excitement about this idea. How do people feel about that?
Ernest, to be honest, I think Tim made a great suggestion, like to have a community forum to really collect some information. I mean, we're making some assumptions right now, but it would definitely be nice to have a community forum and be able to really get the pulse of the community and then move forward, because we don't necessarily have all the answers to the questions.
Sounds good to me. I was listening to our two speakers last time who spoke about all the services that OSL is available to give. And I was trying to figure out if there was some way that we and OSL could combine to have a deaf arm of OSL that could become a small agency. I was just brainstorming in my head. Sometimes it's good if you can bring two groups together and build on something that's already there. But one of our premises is that, of course, whatever we build will be run by deaf people. And I don't think OSL is run by deaf people. So it probably makes sense to proceed this way with a community forum and see if we can get ideas, have some activities at that forum where we can draw from the community to find out what they think the needs are, so that we actually do a needs assessment of some kind.
Can I suggest that we focus on that now exclusive to everything else.
Mhm.
And not even talk about doing anything else until we've decided, until we've had the community forum. I think it's a great idea, but I think we need to take a first step.
Mhm.
And I think that we're, everything is just too big. All of the notions that we have are to me overwhelming, but I think that community forum, which is a terrific idea, we need to just focus on getting that done. Because what's going to happen, I think, is that that community forum is really going to shape what happens next.
Mhm. Agreed.
So to start talking about what's going to happen before we have the community forum, I don't think it's going to work. I think the community forum is really going to be formative as to what happens next. That's just my opinion.
I think it's great, Paul. I agree. We need to hear from the constituents and find out if this is really the need we think it is. And it seems to me that we have a lot of adult deaf people in our state who really, really are not connected to each other and who really do not have the life education that they need to make the system work for them. So I love the idea of a Deaf Inc. type organization, but the deaf constituency may feel differently. So I would like to have a community forum. Let me ask you, is this something you would see happening on Zoom or in person?
Tim says, okay, I'll talk. I was gonna see if anybody else did. I think a community forum shouldn't be done all at once. I think we need to listen, have some open discussion. I've noticed that having tons of people there doesn't really work well. It's just too much. No, we could research the community and maybe it would be better to do it through focus groups or smaller groups. You know, maybe if we had 30 people show up, you could break them into groups with a moderator for each group, and you would get more discussion, and I think we'd get more ideas. That would be better than having like a full auditorium of people, because people might not be as willing to speak and be involved. And I've noticed that they do have when you have a big group, you know, like in COVID, we haven't really had lots of group, but if, you know, in person, if we meet maybe an alumni association, Rhode Island, I don't know if they have a way to get information out to people who just graduated, who are younger. Maybe we could get younger groups. You know, maybe we've already had some contact with alumni and senior citizens, but maybe people like, you know, and some people in their 40s and 50s, but I don't think we've really addressed the young people yet. I think that's really a big gap. You know, I think there's a lot of challenges in outreach. And again, our community is so broad. There's deaf, deaf-blind, hard of hearing, latent deaf. It's so diverse that, you know, do we focus on them all? Do we focus on one group? So that's where I'm feeling like we need to figure out who we should be doing outreach to, who the people are that we should invite to these meetings.
In response to your thoughts, Tim, are you suggesting that we should have several different events, different focus group nights, maybe have one night where we invite the 20 to 35-year-olds and another night where we meet with the senior citizens and another night where we meet with a deaf-blind group of constituents? Is that what you're suggesting?
We're going to switch interpreters.
Tim's saying, I'll wait for the spotlight. Okay, great. So what I'm thinking first, we could meet with an open forum just to see who turns out. And boy, it is tough now because of COVID. If we're on Zoom, then you have deaf-blind people who might feel excluded. There's going to be people who don't have Zoom or don't have internet connectivity. And senior citizens might struggle with connectivity. BIPOC people might have issues. Do they have computers? Do they have internet capacity? So we would want to figure out some form, some way that all of those people could be there, and we could have OSIL come in and be part of the process. I don't want to feel like we've just, pushed them to the side and go forward, because it's very important to have them involved, and the Tri-County to have them involved to make sure they're part of the process. I don't want to feel like we're excluding anybody and have everybody going off on their own individual silos. I want to be very collaborative. And maybe we could just start the first with just an open, welcoming in people who are stakeholders, inviting some people. I mean, maybe really going out and doing some outreach. The senior citizens who are deaf, and also people who have lost their hearing who are senior citizens. There might be people who are at the centers with senior citizens in different areas around the state, and they don't identify as part of the Rhode Island Commission, maybe, or they're not going to come to us because they don't drive. Driving at night is too difficult. They want daytime meetings. So each group has their own limitations and their own needs. And I would like to have something, in their neighborhoods and local to them if I could. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I was thinking just to throw out some ideas to start us off.
Thank you, Tim. Any other thoughts? I'm personally a little overwhelmed by the thought of that many meetings. We're all volunteers, and I'm not quite sure how we would do it, but I understand the wisdom of what you're saying, Tim. Bethany wrote in the chat, would it be possible to have it in person, but have it live streamed as well? I think that's possible. I don't know where we would have it live streamed, but I'm sure it's possible if we wanted to set that up. Ernest, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes. I understand you're feeling overwhelmed, and the commission would certainly be able to support whatever is needed as far as outreach, contacting the different groups. We have the employment committee. We have different committees that would also help and do outreach to the members. And so I feel like if this committee needed something, if we were going to set up a community forum or focus groups, the commission staff could work on that. We could get the date out. We could make sure that people are aware of it. And, we've got the healthcare committee, we've got the employment committee, and we've been having some forums during COVID by Zoom. And even so, there's not big numbers, maybe 10 or 15, I would say 10 to 20, depending on what the topic is. I mean, if it's something that people aren't interested in, they're not going to show up. But if they're interested, even so, we have kind of low numbers. And as Tim was talking about, a lot of people don't have access to Zoom, to internet. They prefer in person. So with COVID still out there, of course it is decreasing, but what we got the Delta variant showing up in some places and it's spreading. So people are still concerned. And I know, everybody's a volunteer, as Nancy mentioned, and yes, that is true, but we are paid staff at the commission office. Tell us what you need to happen and we can follow up and make sure that it happens for this committee. Just let us know what you need and we'll make it happen.
Thank you. So would this group like to proceed with starting with one forum where we present some of the options that could be available if we were to set up a small agency and ask people to break into small groups to talk about needs that an agency such as that could address? Is there anybody who feels this is moving too fast or is not a good idea? Please speak up because we really need all your voices. Well, I don't know whether to take your silence as a government, but I'm going to take it. Oh, here we go. Paul, yay, thank you.
I think that I would recommend, just to keep us focused, that the very next step be developing a flyer that you could put in people's hands, asking the most basic questions that we've come up with. Working on that might be a good, just literally the very first step. It's something concrete and it's something that we can do collaboratively. Again, just my opinion for what it's worth.
It's worth. So if we were to begin to advertise a forum with a flyer and with notices on the commission listserv and website, that we would like to begin a discussion about a small, I don't know what we're going to call it, a small agency, a small social agency. I don't know what we want to call it. But I'm hesitant to just call it a community center. It doesn't sound quite as serious as I feel like we're trying to be, but that's not for me to decide. But we certainly, who would like to work on this with us to choose a date? And what time of year do you think? You think we should do it right away in the early fall? You think we should do it in August?
Tim is saying, I like the idea of the fall. I think it's a good period of time for September. We have Deaf Awareness Month. So we're thinking 2 months out from now, we could start maybe thinking about people who are presenting and then have a panel. And people could start to realize, oh, there's all the states that have succeeded with this. And it could plant a seed where people start to think, oh yeah, Rhode Island needs this too. Why not have it here? And then we could open up a discussion. So first, maybe speakers on a panel to draw people in, something that people would want to go to an event. Because otherwise people are like, oh, a community forum, what's that about? And maybe they wouldn't be interested.
Would you see us doing this during Deaf Awareness Month, maybe toward the end of Deaf Awareness Month?
Just to
We're
make it-
We're always trying to get some interesting things during Deaf Awareness Month.
Yeah, I would say not necessarily. September, there's a lot of competition with events. So maybe October, because we could then focus on this topic. I'm thinking we also have some things in November. We always have the coffee hour. That's already established. So October might be a gap between September and November. It'd be a nice time. And Ernest is saying, I agree with Tim. I think September gets busy with deaf awareness night, and, you know, there's a lot, we're hosting a lot, like a whole series of different Zoom, we're already contacting people. And we're talking about Emergency Preparedness Month as well. So we already have those two. So September is busy, but October sounds like a good time. In November, Tim's correct, we have the Deaf Coffee Hour. And we are also going to have the kickoff for the RICDHH 30th anniversary, which will be the following year. So November is our kickoff. November, we'll have some events spotlighting that, which will start the year of celebration for the 30th for us, for Rhode Island. So I would say October sounds the best too.
Do we anticipate that the coffee hour will be pretty similar to the way it's always been, or could that be a night where a forum could be announced? You usually get a large crowd. That's why I brought it up.
Ah, I see what you're saying, but right now, we're working now on what the coffee hour is going to look like. And we're thinking it's going to be a hybrid form. There are going to be people speaking. We're going to have awards, and some of that'll be on Zoom. And maybe there'll be a specific date where vendors come together and we can set up some tables or something and have some social time, but only for 2 hours, let's say, or 3 hours, because the State House hasn't even opened officially yet. We would need to look for a venue.
Mm.
And I can't commit yet on it. We're still kind of feeling things out. Will it be hybrid? You know, where we have like one day where we come together socially for a short time face to face, but the rest of it is on Zoom. That's what we're sort of talking about at this point.
Okay, so we're talking about October, it looks like, and we're talking about a forum that may be followed by lots of smaller forums later to specific groups that we would have to go out and meet with. So if we don't get deaf blind people at this first time, we would need to have an opportunity for them and do some planning to get their feedback. And if we don't get a lot of senior citizens because it's in the evening, we would need to maybe go out to one of their meetings in the daytime and talk to them. I think it's going to take a multi-pronged effort. So shall I go ahead and choose a date in October? That we will start to plan a forum. I want to be really honest. I'm not doing this alone. So if people aren't going to be working with me, we're not going to do this. All right. October is fine, Paul says. Tim says, looks like a plan. And Leela is thumbs up. All right. We will pick a date. I will work with the commission to pick a date in October. And Jen is agreeing, yes, October. And then the commission will begin to advertise it and help us recruit according to their many avenues. And then perhaps at our next meeting, we could actually meet sooner rather than later, so we could plan what would the panel look like? How would we begin to generate discussion? Unless you feel we can do that today.
Tim saying, I'm thinking we had a commissioners meeting. So we had the official commission meeting last month or May. And then yesterday we had the executive meeting and we identified some strategic goals after we had voted on them in May. And we were trying to think about how we could coalesce that with this. One of them is diversity inclusion. We have a goal on that. Another one is interpreter referral services. That's not pertinent to this, I don't think. Another one is, that would be, I think, good, is legislative networking and liaison. And I think we need to clearly identify the community needs for those purposes. And I think our focus, if we're starting with a panel, let's say, we need to think about what are the hot topics that are happening in the deaf community right now, and perhaps develop some opportunities where, you know, if we did have an agency that was going to be set up, how would we connect with the legislature to express what the issues are in the deaf community, how we need funding, and maybe to gain their help in setting up an agency like that. And I think it would be great if we could get those 4 strategic goals, or the ones that overlap with our purposes. There's diversity and inclusion, there's the legislature, because we would be going out to different areas that are constituents of different. And the Ed committee could work with the other committees, collecting and identifying some of those issues from the community.
Any reflection on what Tim just brought up? I caught 3 of the goals: diversity and inclusion, interpreter referral, legislative liaisoning, and I didn't get the 4th.
I didn't, yes, hold on a sec. The 4th one is related to visibility, public communication and outreach. Actually, the 4th one overlaps too with what we're talking about within this committee. Yes. Transparency.
I agree. The 4th one
The
really.
only one, the 3rd one, the 2nd one I mentioned, interpreter referral, doesn't really overlap, but I think the 1st, 3rd, and 4th do and could really be impacted.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I just want to keep this into bite-sized pieces. There's so few of us, and want to make sure that we can actually start something that we can finish. So we will set a date, and we still have some time to discuss what the panel might look like. Who would you want to invite to generate excitement at this forum?
Tina, you're muted. Tina, you're muted.
It's muted. We should make it more of so I think maybe we could, it could become a bigger event, not necessarily focused on education only, but maybe what the community needs are in general. Maybe invite a panel that could have a good discussion related to equity and inclusion, related to our other strategic goals. Maybe we could, overlap with that and try to figure out our best approach from there. Ernest, do you have thoughts? Not quite sure what you're thinking. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think I need more time to think about it because the employment committee and the tech committee isn't even off the ground yet. So, I think we might have our own goals, our own visions to develop. So, other committees are already set up. And, we've had webinars and panels and things, but maybe one event for everything, just to try to get the pulse and identify things. I think Tim, we could get all the commissioners together maybe, and people say, oh, the commissioner's coming to this event, it's a big deal. Maybe they'd be motivated to come and see what's going on. Yeah, I need a little bit more time to think about it though. Thanks.
Well, we already know that we have talked about there's a need for adult ed. There's a need for deaf-blind services. Why don't we start there? Why don't we have someone from the deaf-blind community within our community talk about their struggles and what they would like to see? And then maybe have someone talk about young parents who need parenting classes, and somebody else who, we could really have a variety of speakers just on the needs that we've already identified about literacy and that list that we generated last year that had all the many things that we felt were needed. We could have different speakers talk about needs and then open it up and do some activities with the audience that would have them break into small groups and talk about what are your struggles? What are your needs that the commission could be thinking about? And some of them are very likely going to fall under this kind of an agency.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion because I've recognized that a lot of people like to listen to other people, hear about their experiences, their journeys, their struggles. People are interested in hearing that. And people can really get a feeling from that, like, oh, yes, I understand that. I agree with you. And maybe if the commission hosted, maybe we could get people to show up based on their experience, and if you have some real experience, they could see that person had a similar struggle to them and they made it maybe, or they got the help they needed. So I think if we got people together, might be a good way to get people buy-in. So I like that suggestion, to really invite like a deaf-blind person, a young parent maybe who needed some extra skills.
A senior citizen. Someone from the immigrant community who's struggling to access resources or struggling to pass the citizenship test. Okay, this is starting to feel like it's got a body to it now. I was really feeling like we were in a fog, but this is starting to feel like we could really do this. I'm happy to offer the School for the Deaf if you think that's a good location. If you think there's a better location, we can work with that, but we'll start with a date. And I would ask you all to be thinking about who. Certainly there should be someone talking about employment, someone talking about.
Excuse me?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Derek? Oh. Someone jumped in and jumped out. I was saying, I think we can start by setting a date and brainstorming some people who have good stories to tell. And we could begin to say, these are all things that a small agency like a Deaf Inc. could be helpful with. Our own agency run by deaf people for deaf people that would raise the level of awareness and education and advocacy within our state. Am I on the right path? I'm a lot better at meetings where I can see you.
Saying, I think the challenge is that there's so many possibilities. For example, education. Our committee could, talk to diversity inclusion. We could invite someone who is an expert in providing workshops or trainings, providing leadership trainings. There's so many different things. There's not really only focusing on, stories. Sometimes the community, has already broken up into different groups and we want to pull them back together. But it's not always easy. There's not an easy answer for that. So maybe we need to try to approach different groups differently and see what's going to work for us.
Okay, I'm back to the beginning now. I'm confused. Where do we go? If that's the case, that we have to approach different groups differently, I'm not quite sure what to do. Are you implying that a one forum to get started is not the right answer? Tim, I really want to hear you.
Yeah, I was just trying to, before COVID, thinking back, we would host community forums and we would host one and people would come, a good number of people, but they were all deaf, not hard of hearing, mostly deaf people came and we collected information from them. And so then we started talking about healthcare and interpreter access. Those are big issues. And right now, we're working on those things. But then later, we noticed that there were only a few people showing up. So my hope is that if we host this in October, that we should include those different groups, different, commissioners, members of the community, plus invite the deaf community and make it much more of a bigger event to share ideas and stories. But I think that idea of a panel would be a good way to kind of spark, oh yeah, I've had that same experience, or I've heard that story before. So I think that would be nice, but I'm also trying to think, like, for deaf blind people, who we would invite. Maybe Ernest or Pam or someone from the commission knows those people and could invite them. But I guess we need people who are kind of brave and not afraid to come forward. Because sitting on a panel sometimes is very intimidating, having all those people look at you. Some people would be fine to do it and others might be taken back. So I don't know. I think it's a good idea. And if we're talking about October, then we have some time, but we do need to start now. And I'm just hopeful that we'll find the right people who are willing to do it.
Well, I will have to rely on our deaf community to come up with those people. Ernest?
Yeah, I think there's some people who I could ask who would be happy to do it. I think we could find some people who wanted to come and explain about their journey. Pam's a great person to contact as well. And so I'm sure if I reached out to some people, we could find some people. I really don't think that's a problem. I think that's fine. And Pam knows a lot of people, and we can find the right people who can share the right kind of information. With their experience and their struggles, and I think that. But for deaf, blind, hard of hearing, if we can get 2 or 3 people, we'll have to do some thinking and figure it out. But maybe we could ask people from the commission to join. We'll have to get creative and maybe come up with a theme for the panel. I don't know what exactly, why is the community forum being setting up? We want to change things for the future. We want to identify if there's any new issues that we need to resolve. So I think that we can start that conversation. And I think if people see that, I think they'll understand that it's a good idea for them to come or to watch and be able to listen and see what changes we can make here in Rhode Island, So I think we just kind of need to come up with a theme and draw people in.
Okay. Thank you, Ernest. I agree. I think we can do it too. One of the things I have learned, though, in setting up workshops is that the panel should not be lengthy. It's much better if each person is really limited in time to speak and you use what they say to jumpstart small focus groups and discussions. It just makes the evening much more inclusive because you get to listen to the people who actually came out and not just the experts or the people experiencing it. I think we have to manage the panel well and move quickly from the panel and the issues that the panel raises to the audience and small groups where they're able to discuss when you heard that in the panel, did you identify with that? What other issues are barriers to your success? How can we make Rhode Island a model for breaking down these barriers? So that's just what's going through my head. So as it stands now, just for the sake of the minutes, we are in agreement that we're going to pick a date in October. Ernest is going to think about some folks for the panel, and any of you as well. If you have a client or a friend or someone that has had to overcome a barrier that was difficult or is now facing a barrier that education or resources or advocacy would help. I'd like to keep it, if possible, away from parents who are trying to get good education for their children. This is a very separate issue. This is more about bringing education and information to the community in a central location. So we will do that and begin to develop some advertising for this. And the next step is, shall we meet again to work out some particulars in about a month or in the beginning of September? What's your pleasure?
Ernest is saying, I'm not officially on the committee, but I think your suggestion is perfect. Breaking down barriers and being able to educate the community. I think that's great. And yeah, we can set up a date in September. Maybe we could go ahead and try to pick people. I'll let the committee decide what they want to do, but I think your suggestions are great, Nancy. So And we can set up an interpreter for the meeting, Zoom, or however we want to do it. Just let us know, and I'm happy.
I'm going to throw out a date, Ernest, for September. Let me just get my calendar going here. September 7th, 8th, or 9th. Wait a minute, I have a board meeting. Oops, hang on a minute. September 16th. I'm so sorry. It's really not working on my calendar here. Hang on. Yeah, I'm back to the 9th, September 9th.
Just so you know, there are no conflicts so far in our scheduling system.
Oh, that worked. All right, Leela says it works for her. Tim says it looks good for him. Any news from Paul or Jen?
Paul says yes.
Paul says yes. And Jen says, unfortunately, she won't be able to attend on the 9th.
Would this again be at 4:30? Nancy, this is Bethany.
Is that the best time still for people, 4:30? Yes, okay, I think so. Okay, let's go with the 9th. Jen, we'll miss you, but we'll make sure you get the notes, and we'll finalize some planning then. By then, we'll have a date in October, and we'll have hopefully some folks for a panel, and then we can meet to talk about what kinds of small activities we could do with people who attend to break them into focus groups, or what questions could we develop to jumpstart the conversation. Thank you, everyone. Any other next steps that people want to talk about under new business?
This is Ernest. Ernest is saying if everybody can see me. Before you wrap up, I did want to just say, I wanted to recap about the meeting so far so that I can talk about it. I can put it on the meeting agenda because we have the commission meeting next Wednesday. So I just wanted to get a quick recap summary so that I can use that when I report back to the larger commission. Thank you.
So I'll give you what I understand to be our summary, and hopefully Bethany will capture this in our minutes. We are going to choose a date in October.
Yes, but yeah, I like 2 or 3 sentences I'm thinking, if you just could recap what you're going to be planning so that I can jot that down. Bethany can jot it down. Thank you.
So we have agreed that we will plan a forum in October. I will work with Pam to set a date. And that forum, we will invite as many members of the deaf community in our state and stakeholders as we can. We will invite 3 or 4 people to serve on a panel and illustrate a few of the barriers that exist that we hope could be overcome by more education through a small agency. And we will then break into small groups and jumpstart the conversation and hear from the constituents if they identify with this idea, if they have other barriers that they think need to be met. And after that, we will reach out to smaller segments of the community to get their feedback, whether it's senior citizens or deafblind individuals who might not be able to come. And we will, as a group, meet on the 9th to do some more planning for this. Is that clear, Ernest? Is that what you wanted? And it
Yes.
will be held at the School for the Deaf unless somebody has a better suggestion.
All right, that sounds great.
Okay, if anybody has any other ideas, please shoot me an email. And if there's no new business, I think we've come to an end. Let's hope we can get people excited about this idea. I think Rhode Island would benefit so much from this kind of an organization.
Yes, thank you.
Jen, were you saying goodbye or did you want to have something to say?
Jen, you're, oh, okay.
Okay. Any other business before we close out for tonight?
Thumbs up from Tim.
Okay, Tim, I had hoped that we could discuss if there was any legislation, but unfortunately, the agenda had already been put in. But certainly, we can always be thinking about whether there is education that we, legislation that we should be putting forward and supporting. All right, good night, everybody. I will see you on the 9th, but you'll hear from us before that. Thank you, everyone, and especially Bethany. Thank you so much for taking minutes.